Ladies and gentlemen, it's that time you've all been waiting for. So grab a hold of your pocket protectors and join us for Nerd World!
Ended too early.
Grab a hold of your pocket protectors, because it's time for Nerd World.
Thank you, JS. Welcome to Nerd World, everybody. We need some. We need a clap track, Chris.
Pause.
We're super proud and pleased to have an outstanding gentleman that I've known for, I don't know, a year or so on today's show. And he's got an amazing background, and he's a true nerd. Every time he shows something or talks about something, I'm like, yeah, I did that, or I had that. Not like him completely, but we're both techie hardware nerds, and we're super pleased to have Mr. Courtney Goodin on today's Nerd World program. Welcome, Courtney.
Thank you. That's okay. I don't know how to pronounce my name either.
This is why we refer to IMDb.
Exactly. Yeah.
And when we do that, we're terrified because there are lots and lots of listings.
You just pretend you're from the South. It's a Goodin.
It's
So
a
there
good,
you go.
That's what I used to tell people. It's Goodin, like, and Courtney, like, see you in court. You'll be on your knees. Yeah.
So Courtney has a little surprise to share with everybody on today's program.
Well,
I hope
the
it's
thing-
not anything we can get arrested for.
Yeah.
Well, the thing with Courtney is, and I would concur with everything John has said, he is easily one of the nicest guys I've met in the last year or so, and so humble. But when you say things like that, John, he feels the need to, well, share. And when he shares, he does it in the most obnoxious way possible. What was that you were showing us earlier, Courtney?
Hey, Google, turn on the award lights.
All right, turning on the award lights.
That's pretty good. I can't
Well,
beat
hey,
that one.
If I had an Emmy award, I would do the same thing.
Put on a lazy Susan. There you
Yeah.
go.
Oh yeah. Well,
You should have it rotating.
Yeah.
yeah.
The only appropriate place for an award like that is in your bathroom because it's completely unpretentious, but everybody who comes to your house will see it.
And it's great for killing roaches.
I have a question.
Wait, what's wrong with your house that everyone who comes to your house needs to use your bathroom? What are you serving them? Jesus.
Inevitable.
JS, you were saying?
I don't see where to share this, but how do I share this? I want all the people who are not here to come here.
Yeah. Yeah, I didn't share it out yet either.
Okay, yeah.
I'm
So
trying to pay attention.
But Courtney, did you not get that Emmy like 30 or 40 years after you invented the thing that you got the Emmy for?
Yeah, that's right. They awarded the Emmy in 2010. It's a scientific and technical Emmy, and they don't give those out very often, and usually about 20 years after whatever it is you did deserves. So it's for pioneering development in the field of electronic prompting. And so
you're probably one of the few who didn't get this thing posthumously, huh?
Exactly.
yeah. The only at the awards ceremony, Jerry Lewis was the host. What does that tell you? And one of the other awardees was HBO
For what? For
home
what
box
reason?
office cable television.
As in for the technical feat of having cable television with streaming movies.
Well, yeah, streaming movies on pay TV.
But there was no such word as streaming back then, right?
Well, no, but yes, delivering them upon
yes.
the world through
On
cable television.
coaxial cables.
Yes.
Courtney,
What
we're
you
honored to
did
have
was
you.
you took an old Atari 2600 computer, right? Something like
No,
that.
it was an Atari 800, but the 2600 was
Atari
just a
800.
game.
Wow,
device.
okay.
Uh-huh.
And you added like about $30 worth of stuff to it, and so it was about $180 total. And then you sold them for like $3,000. Is that
$4,000? You're a grand short.
Wow, $4,000. Okay.
Yeah. Yeah,
And
they
this
were
is in-
well
and
at
this
the
is-
time.
This
Atari's
is in the
this was-
70s when $4,000 is
A lot of money.
pricey.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, the thing is that at the time, this was the first computer teleprompter,
Yes.
CompuPrompt was the name of the product, and it ran on an Atari 800, which actually was, you could get the 800s for around $300 at that time, and you had to buy a $500 disk drive, and and then I designed the camera mount hardware. That was all custom built, but that was around the camera mounts. The software alone, and the software with the computer was $4,000, but what it replaced was a telescript or QTV mechanical teleprompter, which was those old mechanical ones, which had a belt, which you put your script on, and it scrolled the tractor feed paper, or it had
That's
a
what I
belt
learned on.
Yep.
laid stuff on it. It was crinkly and made noise. And
it get caught up sometimes too.
yeah, those were $12,000. So my software, which worked a lot better, of course, than mechanical teleprompter, because you had instant access, you could edit, you could jump anywhere instantly and go back to the beginning
And
instantly.
what language was that, Courtney?
English.
Computer language.
I'm speaking English, John. Yes, that's it. That's, maybe you're not accustomed. I wrote it in assembly language, and I wrote it in a hybrid. That's the big secret. I used a lot of the basic code that was in the Atari.
Was that 6502? What processor?
Yeah,
was that?
6502.
Yeah.
Yeah, but I wrote all the high-speed stuff, all the smooth scrolling and the text manipulation and all the graphic stuff in 6502 assembly. And I called those subroutines from within the framework of Atari Basic.
Wow.
So it required a cartridge, and I took the basic cartridge and I removed a lot of the stuff that wasn't needed for my software and put my own code in there, and burned new cartridges. And so it was also one of the first pieces of software to have a protection dongle. So I kind of invented the digital dongle as well, by mistake.
Was it akin to all the other digital dongles in the 70s and 80s, or the 80s, that were all just cross-connected wiring for
no, it was actual digital. It had a chip in
there's
there.
actual logic in there somewhere?
Yep, it had a chip in there, and you're right, most of the other dongles just would put a resistor across two analog inputs on the game port, and it would read the resistance, and if it was in a certain value. But those are easy to spoof easily and duplicate just with an ohm meter. But no, mine, if you put an ohm meter on it, you couldn't tell, because there's no power feeding to it, and you had to send it signals, and it had to react and send a signal back that it was okay. It checked the serial number, and it checked the serial number of the cartridge, and then it came back and unlocked itself. But I sold them to IBM, and so
we used to disassemble those routines and look for the outs and the ins and put a jump command over the top of those.
Yeah, if you could find the routine, I encrypted that.
Usually they're right on top. The ones that were easily hackable. I mean, the ones that we had on OrCAD. Remember OrCAD?
OrCAD, yeah.
The schematic layout program. They had one of those. Yeah. Fantastic.
Yeah, when you make a piece of software that sells for $4,000 and runs off the shelf hardware that costs about $100, you really have to protect it pretty carefully, because you're only going to sell one.
But it created a lot of nightmares for people having those dongles, right?
Well, actually, a dongle is better than a lot of other. I like dongles better than anything else, because you can move them from machine to machine. If a machine breaks down, you're not stuck, because you can just plug and pull the dongle and stick it in another machine, and so it has that advantage to it. In fact,
if you look at the evolution of rights management software, I don't think anything we've got now is any better, really.
Yeah,
you can, there are companies.
Encryption's better, but that's about it.
Yeah, I can't remember the name of the outfit that came out of the DVD consortium that was used to secure all the high-end academic software.
The encryption's better, but
micro something. I can't remember the name of. I can't remember. Anyway, it was a real pain. They made a really difficult thing to work with. Although you could move from machine to machine and manage per seat licenses in a more convenient way. But other than that, I'd rather just walk over with a dongle. Yeah,
you don't have to be on the internet either to have a connection.
Well, you didn't have much of an internet to be on.
Well, that's true. In 1982, you didn't have the internet.
Yeah.
We had an Atari 800. It was a fun computer. That was one of the first computers that I learned to type basic on that, and the Commodore PET.
Well, the graphics chips in that, Jay Miner designed the graphics chips in that, who went on to design the Amiga. And they were much more advanced than anything else on the market right now. And so it was the only one that could really do variable speed, smooth scrolling of large text with zero effort on a 1.2 gigahertz processor, megahertz processor.
Megahertz. Yes, we're off by a couple zeros.
Yeah, right. Megahertz, 1.2 megahertz.
Megahertz.
And you only had 48K. That was the other problem. You have to load scripts into a teleprompter. You have 48K of memory to work with. And that has to hold the operating system, the disk operating system, and the program, and of course your text for the teleprompter. So I squeezed every single byte out of that I could. I went in and compressed the heck. And
was there a calculation done that you could fit a script for a typical 1 hour program or typical half-hour program, or the space between two commercials, or how did you
could get? Well,
how
what
did you
I
market
eventually
that?
did, Atari came out with a memory bank switching device so that you could cycle in different banks of 40, 64K or 48K. And so I included bank switching in my software so that when you hit the end of memory, you could bank switch and continue to scroll on in the next segment, so on. And you'd have to actually know that you got to the bit. Well, it used to hit when you hit the end, it would automatically trigger the bank switch and would switch to the next. So there'd be a slight pause, about 1 second, before it would load the next file and continue on.
1 second, wow.
Yeah.
Hey, Courtney, where did you grow up?
I was a Texas boy. I'm a 5th generation Texan. Was born in San Antonio, grew up there, went to school there, and graduated from the University of Texas in Austin.
So you're a Longhorn.
Radio, television, film. Yes.
We've got a lot of friends that live in Austin here that we met on Blab and some office hours people too. But we haven't seen Paul in a while.
Yeah, what happened to Paul Wallace? Yeah,
we'll have to reach out to Paul and find out what he's
seen him in a while. Yeah.
Hey, Courtney, I have a question. What do you think inspired you to pre-question, did you ever do prompting off of paper before making your prompter?
I was a production sound mixer for about.
So you just wanted to get rid of the noise.
Exactly. I was working what spawned the creation of CompuPrompt was we were working on a members only jacket commercial with Anthony Geary, I remember it well. And we had a prompter. And
I'm the only member left. I have one upstairs.
I got drummed out.
I still have one here, but it doesn't fit. It hasn't fit for a very long time.
Yeah. Anyway, it was making so much noise, and when we had to wind back to the beginning. And we had also worked on a job for Ford or somebody where we had a really old prompter operator, and he had the really old kind that had that wasn't just the belt, it had the rolls with servo motors, and so you had one on the camera and one for the operator. And if you scroll too far, it would come off the end of the roll and you had to go back over and put it all back
like
together,
reading Egyptian
sync them all
or
back
something.
up again. Oh man, it was a nightmare. So that's when I came up with the idea of, I had written several utilities and stuff for the Atari already and had been on the market. So I knew the graphics inside out, and I went, I think I could do this on the Atari and it might be able to do smooth scrolling. And so I spent, about 2 or 3 months working on the code and got it all working.
So anybody who comes up with a great idea is going to get some arrows in the back because you're so far ahead. What were the biggest hurdles of getting people to adopt a new way of doing it?
Well, they were a little hesitant at first, but when they saw that first time they worked, and anytime the first time they worked with it, I think Tommy Lasorda was the first guy we used it on. And they're amazed when you're doing a commercial where you're reading through something, a 2-minute piece, and they say, okay, blows it and go back to the beginning. And I hit a button and bing, we're back at the beginning. And the talent was used to having to wait for the teleprompter operator to have to scroll all the way back through all the pages to back to the beginning. And I go, ready. And they all just went, what? What do you mean you're ready? Ready.
Yeah.
They read it again and they make a mistake and bing, back to the beginning, read it again.
And then what about changes? Did your system make it easy to make live edits on the set?
Yeah, that was the other advantage, is you could change the dialogue. Yeah, with the old paper prompters, you had to pull the piece of paper out, cover it up with tape, and write
Liquid
new
paper.
text
Yeah.
over it, or type new text over it, and it would take 5 minutes to change.
It was
change
like an
the
arts and
dialogue.
crafts project.
Yeah, it was. Get out
Instead
the
of a
scissors
script
and the
edit.
tape. Okay, now we're gonna change it.
I,
But
I was
just hit
I was amazed to hear that you'd done this back in the 70s, because early 80s, because I was involved in a project peripherally around 2012 where we were building script management software. And one of the things that we were specifically not allowed to do was interface with a teleprompter, because there's a teleprompter operators union whose employees are responsible for keying in the script and this sort of thing. How did you resolve those issues, or was that not a thing? Or
It was not a thing. There was not a telescript operators union in 1982. Later, they came in. There was a union. It was part of 728, which is the electricians union. And they put it under that in IATSE because they were in charge of cue lights. And this was a cueing device, cue lights. So they'd rig up a light behind a set, to cue an actor when to come through the door, et cetera. And so because they were in charge of cue lights, they put teleprompting under the electricians union. So all the teleprompter operators had to be members of the electricians union, and that made a difficult level of entry for a lot of people who could type.
So at the beginning, were you doing a lot of keying in of scripts on the set, or how long did it take before people would like bring you a floppy or whatever?
Well, what we used to do, because it's an Atari, and of course almost nobody had a computer at the time,
Right.
other than these few Apples that were out there and Ataris that were out there. Or Preto, of course, you had. but we would get scripts that faxed to us, and we'd had typists that would. We used to do NBC's promotional weekends, where I'd have 6 units over in the Century Plaza Hotel, and they'd do like press junkets. So they'd bring in the press from all over the world, and they'd put the stars of all the new shows for that season in each one in a different room, and they'd read these prepared scripts for each individual O&O station, so there were custom written bumpers and promos.
Tune in tonight on KPIX and watch the
after the news with John and Jenna. Watch Cheers. So we'd have custom promos for each show for 150 stations, and we had to type all. They had to fax them in a week in advance, and I had a raft of typists working to type them all into a Atari writer, which is what we used as our word processor for just creating files.
I don't remember that one. Atari writer.
Yeah, Atari writer is funny. It was originally written by a 17-year-old kid. And it was called Text Wizard from Datasoft. Datasoft had published some of my other utility software, graphics utilities. And this kid, he went by Dr. William Robinson, and he was like 16 years old, and to fool people into thinking he was much older. But so he wrote Text Wizard, and then Atari bought it and turned it into Atari Writer. And little did they know that he had put an Easter egg in there, that Atari did not let their programmers have any credits whatsoever on any of their software. So he had put an Easter egg in there that if you had took apart a joystick and held down all 4 buttons at the same time, it would pop up programmed by Dr. William Robinson or something. And they found out about that because he told them there was no more room left in the cartridge to squeeze any more code in there. And that code, of course, took up some space, and so they sued him over that.
Oh, geez.
Poor guy.
Hey, what brought you from San Antonio over to Austin for school?
Well, I worked in radio. I was starting in radio in '67, and radio and television. I worked for a couple of radio stations in San Antonio, and a friend of mine that worked for the radio station worked at KLRN TV, which is a dual station that serves it's a PBS station that serves San Antonio and Austin. And so I started working there as a cameraman after school, and I worked there for through 68 or 69, and I was still on the radio, and so I knew I was going to go to the University of Texas. So I my friend who got me the job at the TV station worked for KTBC AM in Austin. And so he got me the weekend job at KTBC. So I was on the air at KTBC on the weekends while I was on the air Monday through Friday on KEXL in San Antonio. So I'd worked 7 days a week on the radio. Monday through Friday, it was on the station in San Antonio. And then Friday night, I'd drive to Austin and I'd be on KTBC radio for Saturday and Sunday. And then Monday, I'd drive back. And that happened all through the summer. And then eventually I moved to Austin and went full time to the university. And went to the university and I still worked on the radio station.
And your degrees in what?
Radio, television, and film. Strangely enough, the very field I'm in right now.
Well, are you still working or are you retired?
I retired about 5 years ago. I still run a prompting company. In fact, I thought almost had to bail at the last second. A job came up for shooting a pilot. They're shooting a pilot today here in LA, and they called, and it was a lot of special setup because they wanted interviewees to come in over Zoom, and so I had to tell them we could do it with below the lens monitors for the Zoom person and a teleprompter, and a lot of it's on script, and so luckily I found my sole remaining prompter operator, convinced him to do it today for me, and I haven't heard from him yet. So.
And we appreciate
Fingers crossed. I don't get a call in the middle of this.
Yeah, NerdWorld almost didn't happen today because Courtney had stuff going on, Colin had stuff, JS, all of the.
Glad to see everybody made it.
The only person with nothing going on was John.
Me, just the IRS audit. That's it.
How's that going, by the way?
Well, we're just sending information back and forth.
Well, I just saw a thing, a news item
with Bitcoin, John. Just give
I
me some Bitcoin.
Probably will.
Well, I just saw a news item. Apparently, the federal government has acquired through various raids and other, government actions, has acquired $1.2 billion in Bitcoin just this year.
Yeah, and they auctioned it off.
Yeah, so apparently the
I think most of that was John's actually.
Yeah, right.
But apparently the
Did it come from Poland?
one has to wonder. The federal marshals conduct those auctions apparently.
Yeah.
And they probably run through the same auction site that goes back to who was it that the senator who claimed to have invented the internet?
Oh, it was Al Gore.
It was Al Gore, right? Okay, so what originated that claim was that he co-sponsored the legislation that established the FirstGov website, which is a government auction site where I imagine Bitcoin would be auctioned.
Courtney, so you moved from then you went from Austin, and then what brought you to Hollywood?
Well, I got my degree and I had a production company in Austin with several other people. There were 5 of us that had a company called Shootout, which we produced commercials, things like that. And Texas Chainsaw Massacre was produced during that time, and they'd call me to do the sound on it. I was handling mostly the sound work.
I love that movie.
It came from radio. And
I have a chainsaw. If you ever need to do like a sequel, just call me.
Yeah, a chainsaw with the clutch disconnected. That's really all they use. So I'd get calls in the middle of the night. My boom guy was working as my boom man. I sent him off to mix chainsaw, and I was working on another low budget feature, which will remain nameless. And we finished
Jaws.
No, it wasn't Jaws. We finished ours, and I got paid. And Ted, my boom man who went and did chainsaw, they were working for points, and they went like 4 weeks, 5 weeks over without pay on chainsaw. And there's a lot of was the soundtrack. And I was on the set a couple of times. In fact, when the guy Franklin, the guy in the wheelchair, gets killed by Leatherface, and he stabs him with the chainsaw, I'm the guy spitting the blood onto
Nice.
onto leather faces. Myself and Toby Hooper on either side of the camera, spitting blood onto Leatherface, because I was there that night and they needed somebody to
Yeah, so you
spit.
got a lot of day player work or
Oh
extra
yeah,
work or whatever from just being around
just
and
being
the
around.
guy.
Yeah, be in the right
Here,
place at the right
pick up
time.
this knife and
Pick up this knife.
Yeah.
So what brought you to Hollywood though?
I think it was a 727. No.
Right. They had 727.
Well, after working in Austin for about 3 or 4 years, in that kind of a dead end market, the problem with working in film in that city, it's a college town. And to get
Been there
paid,
many
I joined
times.
the union. So I was in Local 205, which was an IA union. It was a stagehands combination projectionist union in Austin. And we had formed a cine technicians group amongst several of us filmmakers that had graduated from the university. So we had our own little union clique there, but we'd work on union films when they'd come to town, and I worked on a few union films then as they came through town, but not a lot of work, and there's not a lot of room for advancement. And in the independent commercial world, there's new guys coming out of the university that are desperate for work, out of the film department there, desperate for work. And so you're always competing against a new batch of eager wannabes. And so I said, well, it's time to move to Hollywood. So I followed several of my other friends out here.
And what year was that?
76.
76.
So I moved out here and tried to find work here, only to discover I went to the unions. I started working. A friend of mine, I'd worked on a movie in Arizona, and in Tucson. And the guy was a cameraman, was an old time cameraman, lived in Hollywood near me, actually. And he said, well, if you ever come out, give me a call and I'll see if I can get you in the union. And so I came out and gave him a call, and he got me in. Could not get me into Local 695, which was the sound local, because they were shut up tighter than heck. And you had to be born into the union at that time to get in, actually. And I had no relatives in the business.
But what about IATSE?
That was IATSE, Local 695.
Oh, 695 was IATSE.
Yeah, that's all IATSE. And I was in Local 205 in IATSE. But so I came out and I went to 695 and I said, well, I'm a member. I've been a member for 5 years doing sound in the cine technicians group in Austin. And I came out and they said, oh, we don't accept transfers. Okay, well, so finally,
I know a few guys.
yeah, I know that it was exactly like that. So I got a job. My friend, the cameraman, said, well, here, go talk to this guy, Pat Donorama. Yeah.
All right.
And he was at Local 33, the stagehands local. And so he said, okay, well, I'll let you work under permit as a stagehand. So
Give him a bottle of scotch first before you.
something like that. Yeah. And so the way it worked back then is all the studios had their own departments that were all union. And, there was a camera department at Universal, and there was a sound department at Universal. And it was all, they assigned people from the camera and sound department to different productions, and you didn't know. And Local 33 was the stagehands local, which had a very strange jurisdiction, because their jurisdiction, Local 80, were the grips, and they controlled sets and stuff on the set. The Teamsters controlled sets and stuff as they came in from the construction companies to the loading dock of, I worked for NBC and ABC and CBS. And Local 33 had the jurisdiction between the stage door and the loading dock.
So
that was how the
one union brought it to one union brought it to the dock.
Dock.
One took it from the dock to the stage door, and
Right.
another union from the stage door to the set.
Right.
Yeah,
So-
that makes
Every
perfect sense.
way.
It sounds like every union operation I've ever heard of.
Yeah,
Well, it's not
San
like that
Francisco,
anymore,
it's-
trust me,
It
yeah,
still
yeah.
it still works like that here.
Really?
I don't know if
Wow.
it's changed in LA or Texas or whatever.
Well, it has changed in LA. There's not near as much
And
film
here
as there
it's
used to be. Yeah.
yeah, one guy's taking it off, putting it on the truck, another guy off the truck, another guy on the loading dock. Then when it gets to the floor, another guy's got it, and then once it gets to where it's going, and then if you have to do any wiring or cabling, it's unbelievable.
Forget about it.
Forget about it. Yeah.
A
Hey.
lot of work for a lot of guys.
So that was interesting because I worked out of Local 33, and you'd call in every day under permit on 33s. You're working on union shows, but you have to call in at 3:30 every day to find out where you're working the next day. And I worked on a lot of different weird television shows. I worked on Donnie and Marie and the Gong Show as
Oh,
a
yeah.
prop man.
How was Chuck Barrett?
Chuck Barris was really, everybody hated Chuck Barris. You'd look around and you'd look up in the greens, and the electricians would be up there in the catwalks, and they all had T-shirts which said, "Chuck Barris is a dick." And his floor crew, all the boom operators and boom pushers and the camera operators were all women.
Oh,
It was very misogynistic.
yeah, I bet.
And yeah, nobody liked him. The stars, and they'd shoot 5 of those in one day. We shot it in BC, and I did props. Worked just as a flunky prop man with Gene the dancing machine.
Oh yeah, he was great.
And yeah,
Did you change bags for the unknown comic, or?
we had, well, what we would do, we would go to the prop room at NBC and just pull out every kind of weird shit we could find that Carson had built for the Mighty Carson Art Players. So it's the same prop room. And so Gene, to fill time on that show, they would a contestant would chicken out or something, and so 3 of the contestants they have bugged off before the end of the day. The last 2 shows of the day, they really had trouble filling the time. And so that's what spawned Gene the Dancing Machine and the Unknown Comic, because they were all both stagehands or writers for the show. And they would just come out and fill.
That's great.
And Milt DeLugg would play music, and he would dance, and Chuck Barris would dance, and we'd just throw all weird, giant hands and bricks and whatever we could find in the NBC prop room on at them from the wings.
I remember all that.
That was great stuff.
Fantastic. What was your favorite show that you worked on?
Oh, let's see. Well, the Gong Show was always kind of fun, although it was a grueling day. The midnight special, worked on that.
Oh yeah.
Worked on Donnie and Marie. Mary Hartman. I helped. I worked as a bench.
Billy Crystal, wasn't Billy Crystal on that? Mary Hartman.
He was on Soap.
So
Yeah.
Okay.
Never worked on Soap. I don't know. I worked on a number of shows there. I worked in the Paul Lynde special.
Yep.
With Paul Lynde and Tony Randall and Cloris Leachman, I think.
Did you do any work here in Vegas?
Nope, never have worked, other than being at NAB. I've worked
Yeah.
at Vegas, but nope, never done any. I don't think I've ever done any union.
Jerry Lewis show, one of those productions?
No, not any stage shows. I worked mainly in television production at a local 33, and then eventually, after going on, I got onto a picture called Roar, which is a whole nother story in itself.
Is that the one with like billions of lions all over the place? And
lions and tigers and cougars and jaguars and oh my. And it lasted 2.5 years. And so I was a production mixer on that. And when I got out of that, they had challenged the union, thank you, Jeff Wexler, in a lawsuit to be able to open it up to new members. And so at the end of that, if you'd worked 30 days, and that movie went 2.5 years, so I had more than 30 days, the producer sent a letter which you had to send to contract services, and that would get you in the union with your 30 days credit. So I got in 79 at the local 695.
So what do you do for fun these days?
This is
office hours. Would you consider that fun?
Yeah, that's almost worth getting up for.
Yeah.
I'm having trouble finding fun these days, although I like to watch TV.
How did you find office hours?
Through Mac Break Weekly, watching Alex on. And I had watched all the Twitch shows, there.
Yep.
And I'm in the chat room there occasionally.
For the benefit of some of the viewers who may not be familiar with office hours, John, you want to explain?
Sure. Office hours is a daily Zoom created by Alex Lindsay, started March 25th, 2020. And it's a group of professionals that talk about all things related to media production, streaming, cameras, audio, video, backgrounds. We invite in guests. We had on Luma Fusion gal. That's correct. Isn't it Luma Fusion or Luma Forge, Chris?
Oh, Luma
You-
Fusion.
Luma Fusion.
But
She
they're
was
called
on.
Luma Touch. The company's called Luma Touch.
She was on last week. We've had some amazing guests on. Leo Laporte has been on. All the regulars from the Twit network have been
The
on.
head of Sound Devices.
Sound Devices, John. Yeah,
a
John's
lot
been
of
on
people
several
from Black
times.
Magic.
No, we haven't had anybody from Black Magic on yet.
Really? Oh,
Nope.
I thought you did.
No.
None of those
Um,
Australians, yeah.
And that's where we met. That's where we met Courtney and Doug Ferguson and Chris. And there's about 200 regulars that go in and out. And any one day there's about 200 viewers watching the program, and it's entertaining. I've been on since day one.
Streamed
And-
live on YouTube, Pacific time from 6 in the morning. No, 7 in the morning
7 in the morning till 9 every day.
till 9.
In fact,
second
Friday
hour
is our-
the interview. The first hour, you
Yep.
guys answer a lot of video and audio questions, so
Yes.
people can go on, log on to YouTube, catch the live.
Yes.
Live and ask their questions, and then it's also recorded so you can watch the playback.
And Friday is our 500th episode, and we've done those in a row. We've Christmas, Thanksgiving. We've been on every day in a row since March 25 last year. Friday's our 500th episode, and this is where
Will you be recording a few of them from jail, John, soon? Is that what you're gonna?
Yeah, if the IRS doesn't.
Well,
go
this
with it.
is why there's this budding new industry of tax consultants specializing in cryptocurrency. So
Yes.
you just
Yeah.
need to find exactly the right guy, and
Yep.
no need to broadcast from jail.
So, Courtney, we've seen some devices that you've printed on your 3D printers. That's one of your, is it a hobby or is it professional work that you're doing?
No, I've never sold anything that I've printed. I've given away the designs pretty much on everything, but
But the stands for the ATM, right?
yeah, I built some stands for the ATEM. I built,
And so did Colin.
let's see.
Yeah, I think I started with Courtney's design and made a couple of modifications.
I'm sure you.
But that's how most of these things in the 3D printing world work. You see you see someone with a good idea, and then you modify it and improve it and tweak it to your own needs, and then you have eventually you have something entirely different. But
So what's that you're holding up there, Courtney?
Well, that was a VESA mount that I designed for holding monitors.
Yep.
Basically a tilted
I
down.
built
period.
a stand for the ATEM Mini Pro out of pastrami. It's really kind of fun because you can snack while you're doing your work.
These two monitors up here are on Visa mounts.
Now, if you're going to build something out of pastrami, you really want to, make sure you're cutting it with a laser cutter, because that
Depends on what mustard you use.
Well, it improves the aroma within your
That's actually
office.
that's actually not too far off. This is all printed in PLA, which is actually cornstarch. So this is
Yeah,
all
well,
corn.
So
And
yeah,
the
so
Indians called maize. Yeah.
Yeah. So for those not familiar with 3D printing, yes, PLA is the pretty standard plastic that one uses these days. That and PETG, which is another
What does PLA
Polymer.
stand for?
Polylactic acid.
So are these made from the same high-impact polymer plastics that were used to coat the nose cones over Apollo space rockets?
There are you can get all sorts of polymers, and they all come in reels. Like, I don't know, Courtney, who can reach for a reel of filament faster? Here we go.
Mine are all upstairs in the shop.
Oh,
so
there you go.
I'd have to run
No.
upstairs. Yeah.
My 3D printers are all
Can you
arrayed
hold that
around me
closer to
here.
the camera, sir, so I can see what it looks like?
So it is a reel of plastic.
And is that silver in color?
Yes. Yeah, this one
Yeah,
is.
they make them in all kinds of shiny colors. Look like I've got some that look like copper or brass or silver.
And they
gold.
actually have ones that are copper, brass, and silver, where you can get like 80% brass with a bit of plastic holding it together. And you can print with that, assuming you
They don't
have
have to be sintered? Those don't have to be sintered?
so not those. Those are meant to be, left as is and held together as a plastic product. But there are ones that are made with wood dust, for example, and so
I've got some
you
wood. See,
can
this is printed with that silver,
Yeah.
shiny silver.
Yeah.
Stuff.
They make ones that are like 80% wood with a little bit of polymer, and so you end up with a thing that you can sand down, and it smells like wood and it cuts like wood. It's remarkable.
Yeah, you can stain them. Yeah.
Yeah.
So the one that you're holding up there, Courtney, is PLA,
Yeah, that's PLA, but
and it looks like
the
metal.
silver PLA. Yeah.
Well, that's
Like aluminum.
it's just the color. Let's see, somewhere here I have. Do you have a Terminator head? That's one of those classic prints that everyone does.
No, that when
I've
I
got
didn't,
it
I stayed
somewhere.
out of 3D printing for the longest time because I looked it up and I looked at everything people were printing, and they're printing little,
Right. You're
geek
printing
laws and
little goofy
little
things like this.
goofy things like that you could buy at the dime store for about 35 cents. And I went,
Right.
why would I want to buy at that time, $1,200 printer to print something that you could buy for 35 cents?
Well, it's
And
interesting.
so it didn't seem
So-
practical to me until I discovered the world of, designing my own parts and things.
Yeah, I always find it funny when I see a YouTube video where a guy's showing how he made a code hook on on a 3D
Hey,
printer.
Colin, can you 3D print me a new prostate? I need one of those.
there are people who can, but I wouldn't trust it.
I'd use the Ninja Flex for that. Yeah.
Well, no, you may be able to print a new intestine with Ninja Flex. I'm not sure you'd want to print a new prostate. But so the joke here, Ninja Flex is a thermoplastic elastomer, kind of like this, but more bendable. This is
TPU. It's a polyurethane. Yeah.
yeah. But anyway, there are companies that are trying to print organs with 3D printers.
Yes.
There was one, the most promising that I
steaks?
saw, was doing this
they do in
inside
steak?
a gel suspension. So they would have a gel suspension, and you would basically inject little
They drip little
groups of
cells, stem cells
Yeah.
onto it,
Yeah.
and it uses the gel, 3D printed gel substrate as a pattern, and
Yeah.
it can make a new ear or a new
That's
bladder.
a great episode for NerdWorld, Colin.
Oh yeah,
Yeah,
absolutely.
I
we should do
printed
that
my
at
own
some point.
bladder.
Somewhere here I did print my own bladder. And it squeaks just like a real
Of
bladder.
course you did.
Of course. I can't
I have
find it,
on my
though.
list still, Courtney, to ask you about the good and bad about unions.
Well, let's see, the good and bad. A
Your
lot of people
pension.
thought,
No
if you-
pension and welfare, Courtney. That's probably the good.
pension and welfare is the good thing. But the problem with pension and welfare is you have to work a certain number of hours every 6 months to qualify. And if you don't work that amount of hours, you don't qualify and you lose all those hours.
Even after you retire?
If you retire, if you become vested with like 20,000 hours, then you can retire, and then you have a pension and you have lifetime health insurance, and that's what I have. And so that's what's really been a great advantage. So I don't have to worry about health insurance for the
I
rest
was
of
a
my life.
former member of IATSE, and I'm SAG-AFTRA.
Yeah, I'm SAG-AFTRA as well, but and I'm still paying those dues.
And how much do you pay for dues? Is it a percentage or is it a flat fee every month?
It's based Sound Local, which it's different in every local. The camera local, it's a percentage of your salary that you make on union shoots. The Sound Local is different. They base it on 2 weeks salary, whether you work or not. So and that salary is based on your classification. Of course, entry-level classifications are much lower weekly salary than mixer. I'm a Y3A, which is supervising video engineer, and I was a Y1 production sound mixer for many, many years. And those two rates are the same. Y3A and Y1 are the same rate. That's the top rate that you can get in the local 695. The good thing is they represent you, and they give you a base salary that if you're working on a union production, they can't work below. And then it also prevents abuse, so that the producer can't not feed you or can't work you 14 hours in a row, which a lot of times happens on non-union shoots, without meal breaks or anything like that. So
Do you
although
tend to
we've given up so
disappear?
much over the years that
Do you tend to disappear when it's time for a meal break so you can get the penalty pay?
no, they actually have to, and then they develop, these rules have been eaten away by the producer over the years. So we now have, meal penalties that if they take you past 6 hours, they have to pay a penalty every 15 minutes. But now they have a thing called grace. We're going into grace. Now they can't call grace every day, which lets them finish whatever shot they're working on, supposedly. They can't go to a new setup. They can do more takes on the same setup until they finish it, and then they can call lunch without penalty. But if you finish grace, you go into meal penalty. And I've had to work on commercials and stuff where you're working with the president or something, and you can't take a break because they didn't, his schedule didn't jive with the lunch schedule of the union since the guys came in, and so you work 12 hours without a meal break, and the meal penalties can stack up after about an hour or two. It gets quite expensive.
So
And if you work long enough, you get plum jobs like a tape loader, right? Is that?
Tape loader tape loader was a union job. Yeah. Dummy loader, which is what happened. It is kind of a demeaning title, I think. Dummy loader. Are you the dummy or are you?
So my question here is, because unions have such a bad reputation, it's like saying Amway to somebody these days, right? Is this something?
Well, it depends. If you're in the union, but actually, I know people in the union who don't like unions at all. They're just a member so that they allow them to work on union productions.
Right.
And then there's those that are more participatory and and negotiate rates. And I've worked on the negotiating committee and sat in that room with 60 lawyers from the major conglomerates and
pepper in my eyes right now.
Try to deal with them trying to take everything away, and you have to offer up sacrificial things in the contract that you're never going to win, so that they can take those away without taking away the stuff that you.
So
for any,
are you seeing a lot of production going to right to work states because they want to avoid using union?
There has been actually it's a complex situation right now, because with these incentives that the states are giving, it's what's causing a lot of runaway production. And that's why a lot of production left Hollywood, because they're just basically bribing the producers to shoot in Georgia or Texas or
Vancouver,
New Orleans. Those are the primary runaways. For a while there, it was Toronto and Vancouver, runaway to Canada. But those would be union shoots up there, but it's Canada's IA, and they have different rates and different, contracts. But down here, the rule was if they hired you in LA and took you to, Vegas or some other state, they had to pay you the LA rate. But they have now what's called the area standards agreement, so that each local around the country, IA local, and it'll be locals. There's a separate local in Georgia, and there's a separate local in New Orleans, and there's a separate local in Texas. They have the area standards agreement, which is different rates, and they're not near as good as the Hollywood rates. So if you take a film that's shooting in, one of those states, and it's a union film, but you're not going to get the regular union rates. So it's kind of diluted the income of the union operator by dealing with those area standards agreement rates. So it's been diluted. The union's power is now completely diluted. It's pretty much powerless.
So the question is, would you recommend somebody young getting into business try to get in the union or not?
Yes, I would. If you want to, eventually work, it depends on what kind of work you want to do. If you want to just do indie films and things like that, low budget films, or YouTube.
I want to be a drug lord. I keep reading that.
Drug lord, that's a tight union, very short.
Meth or cocaine, because there's different channels.
Or those, what are those guys that bring people across the border? What do they call those guys?
Coyotes.
Yeah, coyotes.
I hear their healthcare plan sucks, though.
Yeah. The healthcare plan is a bullet and a.
I think John's question, if you want to get into the business, blah, 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 really hinges on what you call the business. I mean, if you want to work
Right.
in Hollywood on Hollywood productions, with a capital H,
Hutch, H. Tomei.
yeah, you have to play that game. But if you really want to, define your future and write your own ticket, you should stay away from that entirely, because it is my opinion that machine is designed to pay the top and strip it from the pockets of the bottom. You'd be better off saying, no, I don't need to work within your system to work. I mean, I work every single day of the week. I was in the Bay Area, JS knows this, there was NABIT. I don't even know if they still exist, National Association of Brotherhood of Electronic something or other. Do they not exist? Is NABIT gone? Well, that was money well spent on my part. I was a NABIT brother for a
They
couple of
merged
years.
with the Hells Angels.
And they did nothing for me. They
don't expect. I was going to say that they don't expect the union to get you a job.
No.
It used to
It
be
wasn't
like
about
a hiring
getting me a
hall, but
job. It
it's
was
not
about
anymore.
deep sixing my possibilities. There was a show. I'll tell a brief story. I could go forever. There was a show that everybody above the line wanted me on it, but the NABIT wouldn't hire me as the TD because they wanted to train an audio engineer to be a TD because he had more seniority than me. I could walk in and cut the thing with my eyes closed and my hands tied behind my back, and they wouldn't hire me. And this is my union that I paid dues into. So I since left, and I make way more than I ever would have made working for the union. I define my own wages. I don't let some guy in a office building to tell me what my rate's going to be. And I work all the time. So it depends on, in John's question, what is the business you're trying to get into? Hollywood is,
and the other
I
thing,
think Hollywood's dead myself.
In the
Well,
old days too, if
you're
you
right
if
to
you
some
had a
degree.
if you had a reputation in the old days, you were working in one area and you wanted to work in another, they could open up a book for you just for the day. So when I was doing IATSE work, they used to stamp my book every day, and that was how that worked. But nowadays, I think it's just the problem is there aren't enough jobs for everybody who wants to do them.
And the seniority system that Chris was talking about is long gone. That disappeared, I think around about early 80s, when the unions adopted negative pickups. And originally they had such a tight hold on Hollywood. If you produced a film in Hollywood with a union under union contract, it could only show in union theaters around the country. And so everything that showed in, a Warner Brothers theater somewhere had to be under union contract. They had to have a union projectionist, et cetera, all the way down the line. And then the producers negotiated what's called a negative pickup. So it allowed them, the studios who were producing most of the movies, that's when the Hollywood studios like Warner Brothers, Universal, Paramount, were actually production entities. And they optioned scripts, they produced, they financed, and they distributed. But then when they went to everything was done union all the way down the line. And the unions had seniority systems, and there were group ones, group twos, and group threes. You come in as a trainee, and then you go into group three, and you don't get to work on any group above the group you're in until all the other members of your union in that group are already working. So the ability to move up onto those, higher, and all the features were group one mixers. And so, it'd take somebody to die to have somebody to move up. So it was very, the seniority system was very tough, and you couldn't advance very well. And so it was really tough. But then once they had the negative pickup, the studios decided that, okay, they want to distribute non-union movies, which allowed them, and eventually the unions signed off on that ability in the contract that the studios, Warner Brothers, Universal, et cetera, could buy a non-union film from a non-union producer and distribute it. And once that happened, there was a paradigm shift in movie production. Everything went from this is a Universal production or a Paramount production to, this is a Lightwave Tommy Khan production through such and such, and, so independent producers are now financing and buying the rights and owning a portion of the income from it. And the studio is only distributing it. And they're renting their facilities to the producer, the independent producer, to shoot on the lot, so they're really just a rental house these days and a distribution lot.
Well, the distribution was in my opinion the last key to the puzzle, and with all the different options for distribution now, the puzzle is kind of obsolete.
But when you think about it now, who owns all those channels of distribution? Gulf and Western, Viacom, the same ones that own all the studios, so they're, they saw to that they covered, Disney owns ABC.
But doesn't
Universal is owned by
changing?
NBC,
Isn't Netflix changing that model now?
And there's a different contract with Netflix. Netflix is a union contract. So not necessarily. Those they're all independent productions. And Netflix is a form of distribution, which the majors are fighting against. So it's a different union contract. We negotiate that separately than the basic agreement.
Netflix does shadowing. They do there's a lot of weird stuff that they do with their productions. So they do shadowing. They do productions where they.
What is shadowing, JS?
Where you have to have a union guy standing.
Yeah.
Union guy sits down and reads.
Look, I'm going to do all the work, but you're going to get all the credit. Screw you.
Well, so they might say you need to, instead of hiring like 40 union guys for production, they'll say hire 10 union guys. They sit around and read newspapers while you have non-union guys do the work.
Yeah.
There's
they do that at Moscone Center in San Francisco too.
Yeah, I know. I worked a lot at Moscone.
Yeah, the last stronghold of the unions is the venues, various venues like Moscone.
Newspaper vendors.
Newspaper vendors. We're running out of time here real quick. We got like 3 or 4 minutes left.
Courtney, I'm just curious. So you invented these things. You did this tinkering quite a few years ago. What have you been inventing lately, or do you sell stuff?
Yeah, what have you done for us lately, Courtney?
What the hell are you doing for us lately? Well, I worked as a production sound mixer for many years, and so I invented a few things with that. I invented something called BWF Widget when I was mixing sound. That was a broadcast wave file utility that sound mixers use, and I licensed it to all the studios in town that I wrote, and it basically controls the deals with the metadata and time code. And there was a big problem when transitioning into digital sound with NTSC pull up and pull down, the way things used to be done, and there's a lot of confusion.
Sync to a standard clock. Is that what that was?
Right. Time code was a method of synchronizing separate audio to the video, or to the film, actually, at the time. And film was, look, there's bliffwidget.com. So I came up with this software, which catalogs and lets you edit the metadata and lets you change time codes or shift pull up and pull down, which was a black art to keep things in sync when transferring to 24 frame film. Had to be pulled up 0.1% or pulled down in sample rate. And this would batch process those audio files. And so a lot of the post-production houses licensed this software, and a lot of production mixers licensed it. And so they use it. It creates sound reports off by reading the metadata on the digital files and printing out sound reports, et cetera, et cetera. So.
And what language are you programming in now?
English.
That one was written in Visual Studio.
Visual Studio in Basic?
Let's see, that one was written in Visual Basic, and I'll write Visual Basic with machine language subroutines if anything has to be sped up. Because I like that hybrid way of working. It's so easy. It's so fast to turn around. I've written a bunch of all my video playback work, and I've transitioned from sound into doing 24 frame video for playback on set, which is what I was doing on Dexter and Desperate Housewives and Entourage, and I don't know.
Being an aficionado of programming languages, that seems like a hybrid of extremes. I mean, Visual Basic is really a scripting language for
No,
windowing
I disagree. I
environments.
firmly disagree with you. I've
Really?
written stuff
Okay.
because it compiles down to machine code just like C. It's just the interface. People poo-poo BASIC because they're used to comparing it to the interpreted version of BASIC, but
Yeah.
Visual Basic and that is the same as Visual C, which is the same. It uses the same subroutines, the same calls, API calls to the operating system as C does. So I can write something in Visual Basic in about 10 minutes and have it, an exe file created that'll run on any machine.
Well, I can't argue with that. It certainly speeds coding, but
what runtime does it require? Runtimes like Visual C does?
Sure. Yeah,
of course.
Yeah.
But
fact,
it works. I mean, to Courtney's point, it works. It gets the job done. It's just one of those things. In the early days of Visual Basic, it was very much a goofy little thing that was added on to, at that time, Microsoft Access. I think that's where that originally came from.
No, that was actually
they broke it off into
VBA.
A thing, didn't they?
They added VBA to all those things. Visual Basic for applications, but Visual Basic has always existed in the DOS world. Even I mean, not
Well, Basic existed in the DOS world. I mean that.
Yeah,
I mean, Visual Basic in itself
Basic,
was a relatively substantial innovation in that it was the first easy language. That and what was the Delphi? Delphi was the other integrated language development environment that came out in Windows in the early days.
I mean, it
works. But it does seem like an extreme to go from Visual Basic and then machine code versus something like C.
I only use snippets of machine code to speed stuff, subroutines to speed stuff up that's time sensitive, or has to work in real time with the operating system.
I'm a fan of Pascal myself.
Modular 2 is nice. Lisp
the guy, the mathematician.
COBOL was good too.
I started on Fortran 4. That was I wrote a computer dating system when I was in college.
Nice.
Fortran
4. What for?
Did that improve your college dating experience?
Yes, because it gave me access to all the girls' information.
So what you did,
I think I'll save this one for me. And I think
what you effectively did then was you are Mark Zuckerberg 40 years earlier.
Correct.
Exactly. I was pre-Zuckerberg, pre-Zuck.
Yeah. Hey, with that, we're going to end the show. It's top of the hour, and thank you very much.
It's been having you here, Courtney, and
thanks for joining us.
Yes, Chris and Michael, and
good to see all you fellow nerds.
Yep,
here in the world of nerds.
Thank you. You fit right into our team here. So
I always feel like much less of a nerd when I'm on here with you guys.
That's right.
For some reason.
Colin, are you queued up? I don't know what that means.
Oh, there we go.
Will John Pretto ever escape from his white hole? Will Colin Hill ever monetize his breathless pulse escape? The answers to these and even more of the universe's greatest secrets next time on NerdWorld.
See you guys.
Will John